We are live. This is episode 17 of Context, and I am your host, Matt Beat, known on YouTube as Mr. Beat, Mr. Beat Social Studies channel. I'm usually joined immediately with Robert, but Robert is currently having computer issues, and so he will be joining us momentarily. But I do have with me Tom Richey. He has joined us again. He is another special guest. So say hello, Tom.
All right. Hey, everybody. Tom Richey. Good to be here. And thanks for having me on here, Mr. Beat. Of course, you can check out my channel on YouTube after you're done with this broadcast.
That's right. I'm pretty sure by now, if you just Google Tom, it will show up. Right?
you need at least an R.
At least an R. Okay. Before we get started into our main topic this episode, which is Brexit, a couple of, I guess, housekeeping things. The first thing is a reminder to review us on iTunes and Stitcher, and that will help the show become more visible in searches, speaking of searches. And if you want to contact us, give us feedback, or if you have questions about anything, the email is contextpodcast@gmail.com. contextpodcast@gmail.com, exactly like it sounds. I did get feedback for the last episode, so that's the other part of housekeeping I wanted to mention is the last episode we talked about the Orlando shooting and how it has been described to be the worst mass shooting in American history. And I got a little bit of feedback from my friends on social media about how, well, what about Wounded Knee? And wanted to kind of explore that a little bit. And I also mentioned, I think I had a couple errors when I mentioned it on the air. Probably you guys all forgot, but one of them was that that ISIS had something to do with it. Apparently, ISIS did not have anything to do with it. That was just speculation that was early on, which we try to avoid on this show, which is why we kind of wait a little bit before we talk about things like that. But yeah, I wanted to look at Wounded Knee a little bit because this was something that was brought to my attention from a meme. Let's see if I can pull this up here. And there's an article that I was referred to that was pretty interesting, but of course, it brought up the Native American massacres. There were several throughout American history, and the deadliest, I believe, was mentioned here. Of course, there was one at the Sand Creek Massacre in 1864, killed at least 70 Native Americans. But yeah, the big one at Lakota Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, December 29th, 1890, at least 150 men, women, and children of the Sioux tribe were killed at Wounded Knee. And it's, of course, one of those darkest moments in American history that I've actually planned on making a video for my YouTube channel for quite some time. It's on my list. I haven't got to it yet. Maybe I pushed it off because it was just so depressing, but yeah, some put the estimates of the death toll closer to 300. And so, I guess what this kind of shows is that the definition of worst mass killing in American history is murky. How you describe it, you can have different definitions of it. And so we kind of jumped in and said, oh yeah, Orlando, worst mass shooting in history. Of course, there's going to be debate about what exactly that means. And so I felt obligated to at least mention, that there were other massacres, actually several more. A lot of them had to do with Native Americans. So wanted to mention that. And Robert's still not with us. That's sad. Oh. We'll go ahead and get started, though, with Brexit. That is our main topic. Oh, look at that. As soon as I said he's not with us, he just magically appears.
I had to go in through the back door.
Wow, that was the most dramatic entrance to context in context history. And that
that's what I intended.
Well, perfect timing. I was just telling them a little bit of follow-up last time. I got a little bit of feedback about what was the biggest mass shooting in American history. I mentioned Wounded Knee, and there was a little bit of discussion with some of my Facebook friends about that. So, but we're talking about Brexit now. there's a lot to say about Brexit, so we're pretty much going to dedicate almost this entire episode to Brexit. And if you are listening, you're watching right now, and you're like, I've heard Brexit a lot. I've seen it on Twitter. I've seen it on The Daily Show. I'm still not quite sure exactly what is going on. I had people that were like, could you tell me what this means? Like, and there were people who voted for Brexit that were Googling it afterwards, like, what did I just vote for again? So before we get to discussion, I'm just going to give some basic facts about it. And what this was it was a referendum, a vote by the people of United Kingdom, and this was last Thursday, I guess a week and a half ago. I don't recall the exact date, but a week and a half ago. Oh, sorry, here we go. This is what we're supposed to need. Basic facts. So this was a vote for everyone in the UK of voting age. Oh, it was Thursday, June 23rd, to decide whether the UK should leave the European Union or stay. And the polls approaching the day were very close. And there was a lot of speculation, but no one knew how were people going to vote. It's going to be close. What's going to happen? And the whole world seemed to be paying attention to this. And it was a very exciting day. But 52% of people who voted said they wanted to leave the European Union. And the referendum turnout was very high, 71.8%, more than 30 million people voting, the highest turnout in a UK-wide vote since the 1992 general election. And so you look kind of the breakdown here. Can you guys see that on your screen? Is this actually working?
It's working this time.
Good. Okay. So there's this little visual for you, but basically there were parts like Scotland that, not very many people there wanted to leave. But, generally the majority was almost everywhere in the UK. So this was, I think, shocking to a lot of people, and the markets definitely reacted immediately to this in a negative way, especially in the speculative markets. And but I was surprised a little bit. I just didn't see this coming. But then I thought about it more, and a week and a half later, now I'm thinking, yeah, this is kind of the direction the world is going. It seems like nationalism seems to be on the rebound. We have a lot of people that are kind of going against the elites in power, the establishment, the ones who rule the world, I guess. And even if they don't necessarily agree with something, they're voting for it anyway. Kind of like in the United States with Donald Trump. I think a lot of people don't necessarily agree with Donald Trump on everything, but they vote for him or support him because he's like sticking the middle finger to the man, to the establishment. So I don't know who would like to go first, but I'm going to open the floor to you guys. What do you think about this? Just big picture stuff.
Okay, as far as Brexit, or
yeah, as Brexit, were you surprised, first of all? And
was I surprised? Not really. I mean, it's kind of like you said, as far as this goes. It's just national. It's like, I think that you see things have been progressing very, very quickly, where we've seen, people, I mean, you used to have this vibrant working class in Britain and the United States. And then, of course, there's the concern over immigration and, just a general concern as well over when your laws are not all being made in your country. And that's something, that was kind of curious. It's like when President Obama went to Britain and, spoke with David Cameron and told everybody they'd be in the back of the queue or whatever. He's since backtracked those statements. But, when he went over there to scare people into voting to stay in the EU, then, there were a lot of people that said, you're coming from a country that would never accept the restrictions that the EU puts on member nations, which I thought was kind of interesting. People have said, imagine a situation where the United States and Canada and Mexico and the countries of Central America, all had a combined government, and the United States paid the lion's share of the bill and didn't have a majority of the seats. how would we feel about that? And I don't think that the EU is necessarily nefarious organization or something like that. But I can see how Britain would be better off. While a nation like Britain would be better off outside of the EU rather than in it. Now, I don't know if y'all have traveled to the UK and Europe. I spent a little time there last summer, and one thing that is telling is how you can't, like, the outlets are different. Like when you buy adapters to plug something in, it's a different outlet. And when you go to Europe, whether you're in the Netherlands or France or Germany, you plug things in the same way. It's like the British don't really see themselves as European. If you talk to somebody who's French or Dutch or somebody like that, they'd say, yeah, I see myself as European. But if you talk to somebody in France, I mean in the UK, some of them feel that way, but it's like, really, if you go to England, especially where the vote was pretty decisively to leave, it's they don't think of themselves as European. So I think that Britain will probably be able to get a better deal outside of the EU negotiating, kind of like we do, than inside it. I mean, I think, markets are always going to fluctuate when there's change. Markets hate change. Speculative markets hate change, and all of that. So I think really this is probably going to be end up being better for all parties involved, really.
Yeah, I would. It is weird to see the reactions. Like, I think the reactions were mostly negative. Like, I watched a lot of media in terms of how different people were reacting to this, and you have some people that kind of lean towards the right that are excited about it. They're like, yes, this is awesome. And then you have people that lean towards the left who are like, this was a big mistake, and they kind of fear-monger. And I think the bottom line is there's just uncertainty. Uncertainty is why the markets went crazy. They don't know what's going to happen. So much of the economy worldwide is speculation. It's like, what if, and it's kind of like Vegas. I always tell my students this, like, that you can literally bet on anything. And a common example now with Vegas is sports. At the beginning of the NFL season, voting for or betting on who's going to win the Super Bowl. I mean, it's crazy to know before the season even begins, but there are people who are betting, and that's how a large part of the financial markets are set up. And I feel like that's why the markets went crazy, and I think a lot of it was people overreacting and a lot of unnecessary fear-mongering. What do you think, Robert? There, haven't heard from you yet. Bearded man.
First domino to fall. It's going to be exciting when more and more of them start to crumble. It's a world, really, it's a Western movement. It's people sick and tired of big government and crony capitalism and bankers trying to control their entire life. I mean, I took some notes here. $46.6 billion cost in Britain every year for the top 100 EU regulations for them to implement. 46.6 billion. It's bigger than what they take in their property taxes. There are 40,000 EU legal acts that they have to follow, 15,000 court verdicts that they have to implement, 62,000 international standards, and all British companies, whether they export to Europe or not, have to follow these policies and implement them. And some of them are stupid, like salmon smokers, people who sell packaged salmon. They have to spend all of this money putting stuff on the product saying, this product contains fish, when it says salmon on it.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous. People are tired of this crap. And it's people in Brussels who they don't even elect telling them that a child under the age of 8 cannot blow up a balloon. It's against the law. It's against EU regulations. It's just idiotic, stupid stuff. The benefits of them leaving are never ending. Britain finally has something to be proud of for the first time since 1945. It's awesome. And I loved watching it. And you mentioned the media. You mentioned the media falling all over themselves. Well, look who the media is. I mean, it's just like they follow. It's just how they cover Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump and Brexit, they're kind of one and the same thing. Britain no longer has to pay these ridiculous bailouts to Spain and Serbia and stuff like that.
Greece.
And, they're trying to get a revote. There's a big online petition. I think has 3.5 million people that have signed
4
it.
million. Yeah.
But if you actually go in and look at where the people are who are voting for a redo of the referendum, they live in Serbia and Kazakhstan and places like that.
I heard it got hacked, though, that they were taking away a bunch of names from the
yeah,
petition.
I mean, people that don't even live in there. People in Turkey are getting on there and voting, come in so we can move to Britain when we join the EU. 10, 12 million Turks want to come move to England. I mean, that's the other side of this, is it's the English wanting to control their own country, their own island, their own fate, their own destiny. I mean, we're talking about a country that hadn't been invaded since 1066, but it's being invaded and controlled by this monstrosity. It's the glowing emblem of big government. I mean, they pull and do stuff that our liberals in Congress would love to be able to get away with. And the English people don't even have a say in it. So I think it's amazing. But you got to watch, because everything that happens in the next 6 months is going to be blamed on Brexit. They're going to blame, if a terrorist attack, it's Brexit. We were distracted by this and we couldn't cooperate together. It's Brexit's fault. It's Brexit's fault. In Germany, they're going to have to cover the cost of Britain leaving. I mean, if Britain does manage to get out and break out, this will be a 2-year process, but if they manage to get out, it's going to cost Germany an estimated $2.5 billion a year just to cover the cost. Angela Merkel will not be able to afford all her migrants.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because the 2-year window is important. And also, I believe Tom brought this up when, if you haven't seen it, Tom did. Who did you interview? I forgot his name, Tom.
I interviewed my friend Colin.
Another lowly history teacher.
Yeah, he's an AP European history teacher from Scotland, and so we had that kind of back and forth. And of course, Colin, being a native Scot, is largely pro EU and that sort of thing. So that was an interesting perspective there. And I think really being part of the EU it's almost like, if you think about like Kansas, Oklahoma, South Carolina, the states where we're from, like our states probably wouldn't do that well if it were on our own. Meanwhile, there are states like Texas and California that could probably do just fine. Yeah, and Matt's got Colin's interview up there. And the thing is, though, that like California and Texas, New York, I mean, they've got economies that could compete with a lot of nations. And I think that Europe's kind of similar. I mean, I think that a lot of these smaller countries, when you think about, Scotland's going to get out of the UK and rejoin.
Good luck with that.
Well, but the thing is, because of the EU, smaller people groups can actually exist as an at least somewhat independent country with additional support from the EU. Whereas if you look at some of these larger countries, and especially the British, who have never really been fully integrated into Europe, like the British didn't even, when the European Economic Community was first created, the British weren't a part of that. And when they first tried to get in, France vetoed them coming in. And so finally they got in later on, but Britain got to the table late, and they never really wanted to fully integrate. It's kind of like, there's that person who, it's like you're having a barbecue and all of a sudden you're about to serve food and somebody announces that they're vegan and gluten-free or something like that. And I think the British, that's really been their role in the EU, that we want, exemptions from this and exemptions from this. We want to be outside the travel zone. We want our own currency and all that kind of stuff. It's like the British never really wanted to fully be in Europe. And so, that's the thing really, that when you look at that country is large enough to exist on its own without the support provided by the EU. I mean, they're the 5th largest economy. I think they've got one of the 5 largest militaries in the world. So that's the thing. It's like, here's a nation that has everything that it needs to exist as an independent country, and when you have that, then why be in the EU? Besides a few of the conveniences that it gives you.
That's what I was saying. I mean, you look at their history, and I can't think of one reason why they would want to be in there. Unless it's about the money, unless it's about the bankers, and it's a way to make more money.
Yeah,
because everything that Britain needs out of that, they can get by not being in it. I mean, you can make deals to travel, around Europe. You don't need to be a member of the Schengen zone or whatever the heck it's called. I mean, you can go to France without that.
Well, what I got out of that conversation you had with Colin, Tom, was that I did not know that they had to still, it was actually still against the law, that they still had to go to the parliament and vote on it. And yeah, they're probably going to vote with their constituents. They're not going to go against them. But I was very surprised, like, well, what was this for then, and why did they call for this referendum to begin with? That was pretty shocking to me there. And yeah, like, I'm glad, Tom, that you brought up the fact that Britain, United Kingdom, when they first wanted to join the European Union, they were rejected a couple times, and it was weird too, because it was kind of like when they joined, it was like, well, whatever. There was no fanfare over it. It was just kind of like, well, hopefully this will be a good thing. Hopefully it will turn out okay. I mean, there wasn't too much strong opposition. There wasn't too much strong, yay, we joined the European Union. It was just kind of like,
Well, one thing to note there would be that, they were originally joining the European Economic Community, or the Common Market. And so they were joining a free trade zone, which evolved into the European Union with the with the Treaty of Maastricht, working on my Dutch there. But yeah, I mean, that's in 1992, 1993. It was signed one year and ratified the other year, or something like that. Emily, if you're still watching, shout out. Thank you very much for sending me unflattering videos on Snapchat and all of that. But that's the thing, that once they started moving to a currency, and once they started moving to open borders, that the British have always resisted this to an extent. And one thing I'm going to say, Matt, I know you said something about the UK and Britain. I tell you, I hope one thing that comes out of this, I hope they finally do unify Ireland so that we can just refer to it as Britain again and be accurate. There is some talk about that. I think it would make things a lot easier on all of us if Ireland had unified.
I mean, would that happen?
Teaching world history is so hard because of that. Because of the, okay, I'm glad there's actually a video by CGP Grey that explains all the differences, like how we should correctly. You know what? I'm just like, whatever, just Britain. I don't know.
I mean, would Northern Ireland actually do that? I mean, that would blow my mind.
Well, if they felt, now the thing is,
like Northern Ireland becomes its own thing, or it joins with Scotland, because I don't see it joining Ireland.
Well, the thing is that Northern Ireland didn't vote quite as convincingly as Scotland did, but they did vote to remain. And some of the I think really, and this is a gross oversimplification, and somebody from Northern Ireland may take issue with me, but I don't think I'm wrong in saying that a lot of the reason that line is there is because of religious bigotry that is not really as much of an issue anymore. But I'm sure there are still some some cultural differences there. But I wonder, it's like if they were having that vote today, that they had in 1922 or whenever they had that vote where they could stay, whether they were going to go with Ireland or stay in the UK. What would they decide today? I'm not sure.
But aren't they still majority English?
Yeah, I mean, at least the way they see it now, some of that is some of that Scottish, Scots Irish or whatever. I'm not familiar enough with that to really comment very intelligently on that.
I know there's walls there.
Yeah.
And I have a video that I show after, in geography, when I talk about Ireland, and the last part of that video is just flat out frightening. It's got some of that great Irish, what would I call it? How would I define it? It's the Irish grunge music, I guess, but I just put in pictures and stuff of around Northern Ireland, and I mean, you have kids throwing rocks at the English patrols and all the
Irish
murals,
grunge.
the militant ones. Yeah, it's a bunch of IRA propaganda and pictures and stuff, but
Oh,
just
I didn't know there was such a
hard.
genre.
I mean, the IRA is actually like coming back out of the woodwork again. I mean, that's like becoming a thing again with them. Like,
Well, because of the
we're so distracted by terrorism around the rest of the world that they're starting to get away with stuff again.
well, but they're getting away with stuff because of this nationalism being sweeping over the entire globe. It's not like the localities are rising up. They are. Everybody is just rising up against the institutions that rule, that run everything, the elites, the anti-elitism, right? That's part
I
of
kind
it.
of see it as, my understanding of it is, I mean, they were there, and then they had the provisional IRA and the IRA, and they split, and half, this segment said, oh, we're gonna just be peaceful, and the IRA kind of went into hiding after 9/11 and the terror list, and they got put on there. But now there's just so much other crap going on around the world that it's like, who's paying attention to what the IRA is doing?
Yeah, it's like, well,
I think it's this year. It's like 2 or 3 early in the year. There were IRA terror acts.
Wow.
Because I go and look at the terrorist watch list. There's one on I think it's a Wikipedia site, but it just keeps track of every single. It's frightening if you go look at it, but it's also fascinating. And
terrorism is one of those words that's just so misused.
Well, these are people blowing up stuff and killing people and things like that. This isn't the Montana militia. Right. Oh, let's go out and play soldier in the woods. These are acts of terror.
Right, but
they went out and tried to kill people.
As the president would say, let me be clear.
I mean,
governments do the same thing, right?
I know some people will look at Hezbollah and go, well, they're freedom fighters. No, they're terrorists.
No, one group's freedom fighters is another. The other side, they call them terrorists.
One man's promise is another man's lie.
But we don't fall into the trap that's like, well, there's good guys and bad guys only, because the other team will always say that the other side is bad. The bad guys, they're the terrorists. There are people that call the American government terrorists.
Well, if you go into schools
drone strikes.
Now, come on, careful now. It's almost July 4th. Like, it is July 4th in some parts of the world.
Well, happy 4th of July, by the way. I totally forgot about that.
Yeah.
It's my favorite country.
But now Britain will have a holiday to celebrate. They'll have an Independence Day.
Oh, we'll see if that ever happens.
June 23rd. Is that what you said it was? Well, Nigel Farage said it was.
I'm glad you brought
now, what's the deal with, like...
you can't barrage the Farage.
Right. What's going to happen
He
with...
is fun to watch.
How are they going to, or when are they going to determine the next prime minister, and how's that going to shake out?
October.
Either one of you know enough about that?
Stepping down. I have some link here about how what's going to happen next directly, like the timeline, but I think I closed it. But yeah, I think Cameron's stepping down in October.
Yes.
And then the conservative faction has to come up. They need to find they're the ones who pick a leader, and I'm incredibly ignorant when it comes to British government. I'm sorry here. But
dude, this thing is like, you need to get unignorant real fast, because this makes our political stuff look. I mean, I'm just like Donald Who after watching the stuff that's going on in the UK right now with this conservative leadership race. I mean, it's just already somebody's been stabbed in the back and counter stabbed, and I mean, it is beyond anything I've seen with the political maneuvering. I mean, a lot of people are comparing this to like, what you'd expect like in a student government election or something like that. I mean, it's so much intrigue that the two guys that were the foremost campaigners for leave, Boris Johnson, who y'all are probably all familiar with, he was, yeah, and Michael Gove was always with him, and Michael Gove was supposed to run Boris's campaign. Well, the morning of the day that Boris was going to launch his campaign, Michael Gove calls, and his people say, well, you know what, Michael Gove's running. And so he's running, and Boris ends up getting out of this thing. And so the thing is, and then people are mad at Michael Gove, and I mean, it's just it's really heating up. And what they're going to do is they've got 5 candidates right now, and the conservative members of parliament. Wow, Boris actually like has his hair combed or something.
I was gonna say, he looks like your drunk uncle or something.
But the
looks like Gary Busey.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? You've got it. I think you're onto something there. Yeah. But the thing is, though, that this thing has.
Oh yeah.
Oh wow, man, Boris. Yeah, I'm really gonna miss Boris. I wish he could have been the prime minister, but he had to get out because he got he got stabbed by the guy closest to him. And who knows what's going to happen. But what happens is that the conservative members of parliament, out of these 5 people, they're going to have like 3 elimination votes, where on Tuesdays and Thursdays, maybe starting next week, that
it would be like Henry Clay, John Adams, Andrew Jackson,
something like that. Yeah, but they're going to have a vote, and the person who's in last place in the first vote will get eliminated. And then the next Tuesday or Thursday, they'll have another vote, and they'll eliminate the next person. And then they'll eliminate a third person, and when it gets to 2, then it goes to the Conservative Party for a vote, like the people who are actually like registered members of the Conservative Party. And so they will get to vote, which I think that's only about like maybe 150,000 people. I could be wrong about that, but it's people who not just they vote conservative, but they're actively involved members of the party. And
like delegates or super delegates, right?
Well, something like that, but I think it's just as easy as being an active member of the party. I do need to look at that, but I don't think that someone has to elect you a delegate or anything. I think it's just that you have to be a registered member in good standing of the active apparatus of the party. So I don't think. I mean, it's not like
150,000 people will get to pick who the prime minister is.
Well, the thing is that
it's like Idaho getting to pick the president.
Well, kind of, yeah, but you've got a parliamentary system, so the conservatives won the election last year. And so as long as they can agree, as long as the majority of the House agrees on who the prime minister is, then, you're going to have a situation where they've got 4 more years to govern. But if there's a situation where there's enough contention, and some people have mentioned this before, that if there's a situation where, the conservatives are unable to rally behind a leader and some rogue conservatives refuse to back this person, then you could get pushed back into another general election. And that would be like the doomsday scenario where everything's up for grabs again. But as long as the conservatives, who hold a narrow majority in Parliament, can unite behind the conservative members of Parliament, will unite behind the conservative leader that's chosen by the party membership, then they continue to govern for 4 more years. Because they didn't elect a president per se, they elect their members. It's almost like if we had a system where like Paul Ryan were the president, because the only thing we'd have is the House of Representatives.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not too different from, I think, our system. I mean, you look at the electoral system and our representative democracy, I think, and obviously there's technicalities as far as differences, but it's both first past the post. It's that type of system, and it is exciting though, because I think just the uncertainty, though. We still, we just don't know the implications of this fully. And I think Robert said this earlier, that this is the first domino to fall. Tom, you and Colin discussed how basically this was the probably well, I think Colin, if I remember correctly, said that Scotland was not going to leave the United Kingdom.
Well,
That's what
actually,
he thought.
he predicted that within 5 years, that 5 to 10 years, that will happen, that Scotland will become an independent country. Which, the thing is, I didn't realize this before I looked it up. A week ago, that 85% of the UK is England. We think about the UK as like, okay, England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, but it's really, it's just 85% of the country is England.
Yeah,
and so, yeah, and so you've got these smaller, constituent parts. And so it is a possible scenario that Scotland could have another independence referendum and vote to get out so that they can remain in the EU. But see, Scotland is really, what I get from this is Scotland is a mercenary. Like, Scotland is going to do what's best for Scotland. I mean, the biggest party right now is the Scottish National Party. And they pretty much, I think they've got just about all the seats from Scotland in the UK Parliament. And, so it's like the Scots, they view themselves as a nation within a nation. And so if they're, if they're in a position where they're out of the EU and they're only about, 10% of the country, and they're getting dominated there, then they could see the EU, getting out of the UK and trying to re-enter the EU as a way to, kind of, the way that England, if you're from England, you're thinking this is national sovereignty. For the Scots, this is a ticket to basically domination by the English.
Yeah, look at Scottish history, and you can kind of understand that.
Oh, yeah.
It's being controlled by them. But would it be like running to a sinking ship? I mean,
well, I don't know. I mean, it's just the EU, I think, can take some constructive criticism from this. Now you've got two factions within the EU. You've got some within the EU who think, Britain's out, we can actually start to, like, now that the vegan's not at the barbecue anymore, then we can get everybody closer together and fully integrate Europe. Whereas there are other people, which I think Merkel is of the mindset, like, this is not the time to try to have more integration. If anything, it's like time to kind of like let it.
EU power.
Yeah. So the thing is that they, there are different factions within the EU. I think the EU makes sense for a lot of the countries that are in it. Like I said, I mean, I think that, it's just like Geert Wilders in the Netherlands says that he wants an EU referendum. If they had an EU referendum in the Netherlands, it would fail miserably. The Netherlands gets as much from the EU as they have to give. And so that's the thing. It really depends on the country, and I just think that Britain, the UK was, just in a position where repeatedly they were getting less out of it than they were having to put into it. So I think, Robert, well, Germany, for some, it's like this has made Germany relevant again or something. I mean,
Angela Merkel managed to achieve what Hitler couldn't do, and that is Germany controlling Europe without firing a single shot. I mean, Angela Merkel just,
after World War II,
she's the most powerful person in Europe.
Yeah, I mean, after World War II, though, you look at Germany, they literally started from scratch. They built up a new country. And they did a lot of the right things in terms of markets.
Yeah, that's why they passed Britain so easily. I mean, the ironic thing is Britain won the war. Germany was bombed back to the Stone Age, but Germany got to start over, rebuild everything. The economy got rolling because you were rebuilding it. They got to create a new government. Whereas Britain's government grew enormous during World War II, and they had to keep it. And we all three know government never shrinks. Well, that's what a lot of this is about too.
Yeah, but speaking of that, I mean, on a lot of the media outlets are saying that there's a huge xenophobic element to this. That really the refugee crisis was really what has driven a lot of.
That's what they throw out when they've lost every other argument. They start calling you racist.
Well, but
racist, shuts down the conversation. But it doesn't work anymore. People have too much to lose.
Well,
Stakes are too high.
I think it's about globalization more than anything. I think that globalization
they're one and the same.
Starting to. Well, no, they're not, you can't.
Globalization's destroying national sovereignty, so you can get the global machine rolling. I mean, it's a very the Bilderbergs, and you can go back and read the documents in 1955. They said this is what we're going to do, and it's backfiring.
But the the globalism has its benefits too, even for people who favor sovereignty. Like a great example of this is free trade. I mean, European Union.
You can have free trade without a global government.
And that's exactly it. Like a lot of people that criticized Brexit said that this is going to hurt free trade, and I understand that
it's the opposite of free trade because it's controlled by a big government entity.
Yeah,
if you want free trade, you just go to France and say, "Hey, let's do a free trade deal." You don't need some old codger in Brussels telling you your 7-year-old daughter can't blow up a balloon.
Well, see, and that's what gets me is, I guess people who haven't, lived in America or whatever, I don't know, but we don't have any trouble trading with the EU. It's like right here in upstate South Carolina, we've got German companies. I've got a German dishwasher. I've got, oh yeah, I mean, it's really nice. But it's really, I've got American friends who study in Europe, they work in Europe, they live in Europe. I don't think that people really wrap their, it's like you hear so much about the ignorance of the people who voted for Brexit, but you don't hear about the ignorance of the people who voted against it.
I've seen videos of those people. You see them where they're crying like, I won't be able to get French bread anymore.
Right. Yeah.
These people have no clue.
And that's the thing that, it's just like Americans can do everything that anybody else can do when it comes to Europe. We have free movement of peoples and all that and goods. Now the thing is, if I'm an undesirable, I can't go there and apply for welfare benefits or something.
Yeah, but the downside of the EU is you have to take the undesirables. They can't even speak your language.
That's the thing.
They come here saying we're going to do jihad and take over the country and take your women, and you have to pay them to be there, and your government won't even let them work if they want to. It's asinine. It's the dumbest thing I've ever seen.
I tell you, he's got some strong opinions about this EU, doesn't he?
It's stupid.
Yeah, he does. Well, I mean, it does fit. I know Robert is pretty happy about Brexit, and but I just try to feel. I mean, it's not either or. It's not always either or. Okay, we can have. There were some benefits to. Perhaps and I'm not just saying the UK specifically, but any country being a part of the European Union. I mean, if you go back to the history of the European Union, it was rooted. What was that organization called again? Right after World War II, and the first few countries that.
The European Economic Community and the Coal and Steel Community and.
Yeah.
And initially it was just like the Benelux countries and France and Germany and Italy. That's the thing that it used to have a much more limited scope, and I think
like those communist labor unions of the 1920s. You listed those names.
Oh. Yeah, I think once that kind of became bloated with the bureaucracy, that's where a lot of people became pretty upset, and I think. I
mean, a bunch of unelected officials running Europe, just dumb.
And it's the same reason why the TPP right now, a lot of people are really upset about that. Is because it's not so much because of they don't like. A lot of them don't like free trade because of the outsourcing and the shrinking of the middle class, but I think a lot of them are okay with free trade because they realize that it lowers the price of goods, and I mean some of them maybe don't understand that, but we the thing that people don't like about these deals is it is crony capitalism because there are certain people that are getting special deals. There are certain, it's not just countries, it's corporations that are getting,
Oh yeah, and then
they're
like some of
working
the
with these
biggest
legislators to,
corporations behind it are like tax exempt from a lot of things and don't even have to
right.
play by the same rules that the guy who owns some little shop in Birmingham has to abide by.
Did you want to mention that article that you found, Robert? Because I thought that was pretty interesting. The one about
Oh
the
yeah, I sent you the link so if
I'm gonna
you
post
could
that for.
pull it up. Yeah, it was about earlier, prior generations of immigrants who had moved from like India and Bangladesh and places like that. Who were living in Birmingham, UK, and they voted to leave because they said these new immigrants are like ruining the place. But they weren't necessarily talking about like Syrians or they were talking about people from Eastern Europe, like Romanian gypsies and stuff. They like moved into their area and just sat there and begged for
Those
money all
gypsies are
day
always
long.
the scapegoats.
I
The
wonder why.
the Roma. Oh, hey, oh, easy
Yeah.
now, easy now.
But they literally talked about how all these newer immigrants came in and they ruined it because there's just too many too fast. Like if you don't have control over this, when does it cease becoming Britain? When does it cease becoming Birmingham? It was very interesting.
This could lead to a greater discussion though about we've touched on this a little bit before, but um, I think it's going to go in waves. I think a lot of people though are just fine with that. I mean, I think there's always pushback, right? Because change is scary and people aren't used to things. But I think that when you think about the world 100 years from now, do you think that Scotland's going to be the way it is today in terms of national pride and heritage, and or the United States like
Well, not at the
tomorrow's?
rate they're going. I
I
mean,
mean,
it
let's
won't
just
even
take.
be Europe anymore.
Well, but yeah, that's the thing. Like, if is nationalism something we know that nationalism is a relatively new thing. It really picked up in the 19th century
I mean, it used
more
to be
than most.
tribalism.
Right.
It's
So
essentially the
once
same thing.
yeah, once the
I
world
mean,
got
languages and
became
culture
modern.
exist because of survival.
Yeah, you could argue that, but I'm just saying because say 100 years in the future we have 12 billion people on the planet, and people and goods are moving freely than ever before, and languages are probably obsolete by then. I'm sure we're all speaking the same language by that point, and I'm sure there's so much interbreeding that we all kind of look the same even. Like, no, I'm just saying, like, I think the old way of tribes and nations, I think that is something that is going to become a relic if this path continues the way it's going. And I think right now you're getting a lot of pushback because there are negative things about this, obviously, because the law is not being respected in many countries, and nations are losing their sovereignty, as we've seen within the European Union. But is it going to swing back eventually? Because is it
It's
going to be to a
starting
point where
to. I
that,
mean,
yeah,
that's the danger. I mean, that's the other thing I wanted to talk about here is because it comes in 5 phases. You saw one with the people not happy about it, and the politicians weren't listening to them. It just kept going and going and going and going. So they did get a referendum. So you get the referendum, and the people say what they want, and they vote almost 52% to leave. But now there's this whole backlash, this pushback, and we got here Brexit deal. Okay, so this is phase 2. You're already starting to see some of the dangers of phase 3 because I'm sure it's the media, trying to, because man, were they wrong again? The people betting on Brexit failing, they were wrong. The media was wrong. The politicians were wrong. So the media now is like trying to run out there and convince everyone they made a big mistake. I mean, if you watch Sky News and BBC in the days after this happened, that's all they talked about was getting another vote, getting another vote, getting another vote, getting another vote. Yeah. So now they're starting to throw the stories out. Oh, racism's on the rise. People, are attacking in the streets and giving all of these verbal assaults and telling people to leave now and stuff like that. So that's kind of the danger there. So in phase 3, you can kind of see some of that. Oh, we won, so now we can go out there and we can start speaking our mind, So there's that phase. If the other groups start fighting back, and I mean, you can see videos all over Europe, and I've seen plenty in England, where you've literally got people marching up and down the streets with Hamas flags and ISIS flags and saying we're going to take over the country. And I've seen frightening videos, where groups of people are fighting in the streets. And I'm not talking soccer hooligans here either. I'm talking like English Defense League tries to march through some Muslim neighborhood and they break out into brawls and stuff. That stuff could really, really, really start escalating. And usually what happens in this situation is the police will try to go after the natives and push them back, out of the neighborhood. So in that group's mind, they're like, oh, it's our police siding with the invaders, the Muslims, the jihadists. So you do run a real danger of some of that stuff escalating to where you've got groups of thousands of people fighting in the streets. And of course, if that gets out of control, you get to phase 5, which is a full-scale fight. Call it a civil war if you want to or not, but that's if they don't control it.
Who doesn't control it though? Because I mean, isn't it whoever happens to have the most military might? I mean, it's...
Yeah, well, this is a different kind of stuff, because England's one of those countries that's disarmed the people. So yeah, I mean, it could turn like what you see going on in Eastern Europe, Russia, when migrants come into a town and grope the women in the clubs. The men grab pipes and baseball bats and put them in the hospital.
Well, let's just say the Middle East
is
stable, though.
Cologne, Germany, where nothing happens. They arrest 2 people for stealing and let them go. And the Germans will only put up with that for so long.
But let's just say the Middle East stabilizes and there is not a refugee.
You're a history teacher, Matt. You teach world history.
Bear with me here. I know it's been a little crazy in that.
Never?
Well,
never has there been peace in the Middle East?
There has. I mean,
oh, come on.
When the British and the French, held
controlling it.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you go back 1,500 years.
No, that's the worst.
No. Jews and Muslims and
Muhammad was on a jihad then, wasn't he?
No, before Muhammad. Jews and Muslims and Christians.
Oh, before religion, okay.
Well, no, Jews. Yeah, I guess it was.
That's what I was going to say a while ago. Yeah. I'm not trying to dominate the conversation. I realize I have a tendency to do that sometimes. But when you brought up earlier, 100 years from now, could we all get along? It's well, you have to get rid of religion first.
Okay, what was I saying? Okay, so yeah, it was after Muhammad a little bit, but yeah, there is plenty of evidence that there were peaceful years in places like Israel where Christians and Jews and Muslims lived peacefully side by side.
They were paying the jizya to the Muslims.
Now I'd say
it was peaceful.
Now I'd say something to speak to Robert's point. I mean, I don't think that you have to get rid of religion, but I do think that if you look back into the history of Islam, like in the Islamic Golden Age,
that was a golden age.
During our Middle Ages, that you had a more secular mentality. You had a more innovative mentality that was receptive to trade and change and all of that kind of stuff. And then that golden age kind of waned. I mean, about the time when Europe's starting to take off. And
Was that more of a Shia-dominated era than Sunni, or like
well,
why?
I don't really know the distinctions there, but it's a mentality. Like I think that really when it comes down to it, that Christianity still continues to be a viable force in Western culture in some places more than others. But I think that Christians, just Christian culture has learned to coexist with progressive liberal culture.
Well,
And that's
Christianity merged with that
The,
Greco-Roman law and
the Enlightenment.
philosophy
The
as a
Enlightenment.
marriage thing.
well,
It's not a religion that's name means submission. That's
yeah.
the
Now,
distinction.
but to say that, I mean, Christianity's gone through periods of time where it's just they're executing witches
Oh,
and
absolutely.
homosexuals
But
and
that's
all of this.
what Matt just said, the Enlightenment and stuff like that. It took time to iron out.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. I think that it's just the culture in many areas of the Islamic world is dominated by religion. And that's the thing.
Hobbyism.
Like, so when it comes down to it, I mean, I know a lot of, Muslims who have a more secular mentality. And I think
American Muslims, yeah.
but that's really what it comes down to is like, I mean, if there's in these places where no matter what the religion is, if the religion has not reconciled itself with the modern world and the world as it is and the world that we encounter, that's a problem. So I don't know if it's necessarily getting rid of religion as much as you do have in a lot of strains of of Islam. It's not just the terrorist. I mean, you go to Saudi Arabia. You're not able to
You go to
public.
Norway and listen to the stuff they say in the mosque, it'll terrify you.
Well, but I mean, just even in a in an Islamic country like Saudi Arabia, it's like you can't publicly express your religious beliefs if they are not Islamic religious beliefs.
Dang sure can't be an atheist there.
A woman can't drive. A woman can't walk around with her head uncovered. It's a very there are a lot of illiberal tendencies that you see there that are not universal in the Islamic world, but I think that they are somewhat somewhat prevalent at least.
You can't be an atheist and run for political office much in this country either.
Well, there is one in Congress. I don't know if they're
There's
still there, but
publicly, yeah.
I think
Where
he
I was
got voted
going,
out. I think you might be talking about Pete Stark, who got voted out a couple of cycles ago.
that's it. Yeah.
He was from California, and by that time he'd been in Congress 40 years. His primary residence was Maryland. So they kind of got tired of that, and one of those get him out years, they got him out.
Oh, get him out here. I love that. Where I was going earlier before Robert kind of went on a little rant, and it was imagine, and sorry, forgive me if I sound like John Lennon here, but imagine that secularism does rise and that there is stability throughout the Muslim world, that Muslims do become more moderate and secular, and that religion doesn't have to go away like Tom said, but that they're moderated, they're not radicalized, they're not willing to go strap a bomb to themselves and die in the name of their religion. Let's assume, say 100 years in the future, where I was going here with this earlier, that there is stability in the world because people have all finally reached the level of the Enlightenment thinkers in the 1700s, and borders become more archaic all of a sudden. Because if everybody's getting along and everything's stable, everybody's trading, everybody is interacting, which we already see this with the internet. We're already seeing, we're seeing cultures overlap. I'm currently doing a research project on viral videos, and it's been very fun. But one of the effects of a viral video that you see is that no matter what the culture, no matter what the country, the nation, these videos do well in all of them. Take Gangnam Style. 4 years ago, you guys know Gangnam Style, right?
mm-hmm.
Do the dance. Yeah.
Still have nightmares.
That did well everywhere. And most people don't even understand the lyrics. And that might be a sign of things to come, how cultures are blending so much around the world because of globalization that could have a net positive. Sure, that's a scary thing to think that nation states, nations, borders as we know them are just going to kind of blur, and it's something that it's hard to imagine in today's world. I will grant you that. In 2016, I mean, we need secure borders. We need to keep some people out of other places like yesterday. But I'm just trying to kind of think bigger picture here. If all this settles down, we do know that violence is going down in the Western world. That sounded really bad. In the Western world, violence overall is going down. And this pattern continues to, expand when people. I know this sounds really bad. I sound like I'm I'm so much better. But the people in countries where the intelligence isn't quite there yet, where they're more emotion. I think that there could be enough stability where globalization we can finally be ready for it. And that's what I'm saying. Right now we are not ready for a lot of that, because look at the refugee crisis and the impact of that. I know that is the big part of Brexit. Back to Brexit, I mean, that is a big. It wasn't the primary driver. I think the primary driver was this anti-globalist thing, really more anti-elite, and that's that Glenn Greenwald article that I'll put that up again. That was a really good read. It's really long. I know you guys probably didn't have time to read it, but I thought he really kind of he got it, because he's talking about how it's really just, even if people don't necessarily think it was a good idea, like if they voted for Brexit and they're like, well, I don't even know if this is going to, be better for us or not. They were just sick of not having their voice be heard. So many people around the entire world, Western world, they feel like they're not being heard. The middle class is shrinking everywhere as outsourcing has become more and more of a reality. And this is like the only thing. Oh, we have a vote on something? Fine, let's just vote for whoever the establishment does not want us to vote for. Back to like in this country, how the success of Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump is another example of that. The elite political class, they're going down, and this is going to continue for the next several years. That's why I think the 2016 presidential election is probably going to pale in comparison to the 2020 election. I think that's going to be even crazier, because we're living in a new era. I think this is the beginning of kind of, for lack of a better word, a little revolution going on here. And I think a lot of it is rooted in the internet. People aren't as dumb as they used to be. They're like they realize that these old systems are like, why do we still have these why do we even still have a president? When is the royal family even going to, I mean, isn't that absurd, the fact that there's a royal family in the year 2016? Aren't we past that here in the Western world? So I think that this is a big trend that is just going to get more intense the next few years.
I think it's just you can get access to information like never before is part of that, because we used to be, what's the word I'm looking for? I'll use the word dependent on the media 100% to get our information. You don't have to do that anymore. And the other half of that, I would say, is everyone's voice can be heard now. I mean, we can sit here and do this. I mean, 20 years ago, I wouldn't have known who either one of you guys were. We couldn't sit here and talk about Brexit and then blast it out to my 20 fans.
But yeah, and then I'd be like calculating my grades in like a manual grade book.
Oh, was that not horrible?
Yeah, I don't know how. In that
the math teacher had to put it together for me. The sad thing was, it was better than what the school I went to after that used. I was like, I want to keep using my Excel document. It actually worked better.
Now, the one thing I might say, as far as the globalization, that I think when it comes down to it, until we do something about scarcity, And that's really, I mean, if I watch a lot of Star Trek, so, perhaps there is a point where we will have done something about scarcity. It's like we'll see more mechanization of tasks, we'll see, where everybody sees themselves as prosperous. But then again, as we continue to automate, people lose jobs, and we haven't really found a way.
Yeah.
I've been reading a lot of stuff about how we're moving toward a society where not everybody's going to be able to work 40 hours a week. There's not going to be that much work, but we haven't made an adjustment to become the type of society. It's still, everything in our society is still about whether or not you have a job. If you don't have a job, you are nobody. If you don't have a job, you don't have healthcare, in this country, pretty much. And so the thing is that as long as there is a perception of scarcity, which I think there's a reality of scarcity in the world today, that you think about it, you think about your team. And that's the thing, it kind of harkens back to mercantilism a little bit, but I think that the whole idea that your country is this group of people who's supposed to look out for you. It's like Mazzini, the Italian Romantic nationalist. So you've got God, your duties to God, your duties to your family, your duties to your country. It's like your family has your back, and your country has your back. And so the thing is, when you look at globalization and you see where all these trade deals are so suddenly, put together, and we see that the amount of wealth is increasing, but the median,
middle class is shrinking.
Yeah, you hear Trump refer often to the median. Not the average income, but the person's income who's right there in the middle. That income has gone down in the last 20 years. Like, the average person is not more prosperous than they were. And that's something that is problematic, and until that problem is solved, people are going to, anytime there's scarcity, then, people are going to get, they're going to huddle up. If we got a memo tomorrow that, like, hey, YouTube's not growing anymore, and people can only subscribe to a certain amount of channels and that sort of thing, we'd be at each other's throats. It's like YouTube is a cooperative.
You're not taking my 20 fans, Tom.
Yeah, I'm coming for you, Robert. Yeah, so the thing is, and then Hip Hughes would devour me. But the thing is that anytime we perceive that there is, scarcity, at root, life is a struggle for existence. And I think that a lot of people are feeling this struggle. And, you talk about all these high-minded, ideas of globalization, all that. And, I do find, like, Matt, you and I were talking about it. It's like, when we saw each other last month, that, we're doing okay. We have college degrees. We've got white-collar government jobs. We're fine. But what about the person who does not have that sort of situation? They're not fine right now. And I think that that's what you're seeing, that globalization has outpaced, is really, and I wonder how much we're seeing here of, like, the late 19th century, when there was a lot of economic growth, but a lot of poor people. But the difference is, Robert, in the late 19th century, the middle class was expanding. And now we see the middle class seeming to contract. So, that's really, I think that we're looking at the economic sides of this, that people feel like their backs are to a corner. And, you think about, look, I want my nation to deal with this. I don't want, like, to be in an agreement with other countries that I don't have control over.
I think the middle class is expanding in certain countries, and where the economy is really growing.
Oh yeah, China and India, it's great.
Yeah, the Western world, the middle class is shrinking.
Where the jobs went.
Yeah, and I think that we talked about this. I think the first time Tom joined us on this show, the idea of guaranteed income is really starting to pick up steam. And
how lazy are people going to become? Because that's kind of like fixing the scarcity problem. When he mentioned that, I'm like, how lazy can human beings possibly become?
Well, it's not. They're not going to be lazy. They're not going to do nothing. You think they're just going to play video games all day?
What do they do now?
Well, a lot of them will, and now I was in a situation yesterday where it was 11:30 in the morning, and I'm figuring like, hey, do I want to get up right now or not? Now, of course, I've got a well-paying job, and I'm off for the summer, and my family's visiting family and whatever. But the thing is that the minimum income would be basically a subsistence level. If you have a society where you have, health care's provided, and you've got $1,000 a month guaranteed income, that everybody is guaranteed that income no matter what.
Sounds like the refugees in Sweden.
Well, yeah, but see, the more enterprising individuals are going to use that. See, if I had a guaranteed income of $1,000 a month, and I were single. Now, of course, I've got a family. I'd probably need a bit more than that, but I could work on my website and on my YouTube channel and all of that stuff. Yeah, I mean, I could be a full-time entrepreneur if I had the $1,000 a month. So, Robert, I think what it is some people are going to be lazy, but the ones who are probably the ones who are already being lazy to begin with. And so the more enterprising people are going to use that as a safety net to get a business started. Because right now it's like I can't, and if I weren't a teacher, if I had a job where I was like always working as much as I am like all the time, it would be very difficult to, develop an app and have a channel and, a website and all of that kind of stuff. So I think that, I mean, I'd love to see somebody put it into action and see what happens.
And the money would have to come from taxes.
I'm thinking, I mean, Sweden and the Netherlands and them, they basically do that anyway.
Well, and I think that it works better, it's like it works better than welfare because it's not like people are trying to defraud the government or anything like that. It's just like, here's your guaranteed income.
Yeah, and it also, libertarians, people on the right, even are for this because it still promotes the idea of free markets, that people can make their own choices on what they want to buy, and you're just giving the money directly to the citizen. And just like with school vouchers, why somebody on the right generally is for school vouchers, if they have the choice, then the market will decide, and that, I mean, quality will go up, prices will go down, etc. Just like I mean, that's any argument with trying to get government out of running things. So it's a whole nother argument saying that no, the tax money it goes in the pot and comes directly back to citizens redistributed without any other middleman in the way.
Yeah, without people deciding, because that's the thing. It's like, we could have a whole discussion on like school vouchers and public education. It's just it doesn't mean the education of the public. It means basically government-controlled schools. And, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Anything that will create more freedom, I think, is a great idea.
Yeah. We got to guaranteed income, man. Well, what started this whole thing was Brexit. So I just... I think that it is important to pay attention to the developments over the next few months.
Yeah, right up on through our elections in November. I mean, is that a sign? Is that a good sign for Donald Trump? I think it is.
Well, if he can keep his mouth shut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the big wild card.
He's not polling very well in most polls.
Well, I mean, we had the same conversation whenever he came out of the bushes. It was one of our earliest episodes of Contacts, and I told you he was for real, and you were like, he'll go away, he'll go away.
Well, we didn't talk about that on the air. We talked about off the air, remember? Because we didn't even want to bring him up yet.
Oh, yeah, we didn't want to bring it up.
Yeah.
It got to where we couldn't even avoid him. I'm like, no, this is for real. This is a real movement. This is people are sick of the government, they're sick of the bureaucrats, and we're sick of politicians not listening to them. I don't know what makes them think Trump will, but he just embodies that disdain.
I think that the United Kingdom really, so much of a lot of movements here the last 2,000 years have are rooted in the United Kingdom because of the fact that they're an island country. And a lot that's where the Industrial Revolution just took
Yeah,
off. And I think what's happening though is that the people there, they feel like they're kind of they're falling behind. You look at Britain the last since World War II, and they lost their empire. They became no longer the top superpower, economic superhorse in the world, and but on the flip side of that, I think that they could end up being a leader here. Like you said, this could be the first domino where you see a reverse movement in terms of people kind of rising up and overthrowing not overthrowing, but voting out the elites. And I gotta share this because before I forget, because if Pete's still listening out there.
Oh, Pete, yes.
Pete? Okay,
Pete.
Let me put this article.
From the Great White North.
Yeah, he's a pretty smart dude. You guys see that? Britain's first Brexit, 286 AD. It didn't last long. This is back in the Roman Empire. I was like, well, this is really cool. But the fact that the Roman province of Britannia in 286 AD, they try to break away from the Roman Empire and start up their own empire, and it actually lasted a decade. And I never knew that. I guess I should have known that, but so that was the British independence, the first British independence there. But then you think about it also, like the United States, we're basically British. I mean, we always, tomorrow is our 240th birthday, but
of the original Brexit.
Yeah. And so I just think that we have so much in common with that country still, and despite being a so-called melting pot. I mean, because a lot of the acculturation that has happened, the people that come to the United States, there's still that large part of our culture, I think, is rooted in the first settlers. Especially you look at Protestant influence, and to the present day, you still see it so much. The Puritans, man, I mean, it's amazing when you find out how many people can directly trace their ancestry back to the Puritans and all that. But anyway.
Oh man, screw that!
Like 1 in 13.
1 in 13, yeah.
Yes.
But anyway, where I'm going here with this is that a lot of this, what's happening with our political system in these two countries, I think will have an effect on the rest of the world. And I know that's egotistical, self-centered.
Oh, but it's it's not egotistical if it's the truth.
It's American. It's what it is.
America.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so hashtag America. Tomorrow's the 4th. Yeah. One last thing. I know we're hitting an hour and a half here. We'll probably wrap it up soon. But I wanted to. I remember when on Facebook Tom, you posted
Oh gosh.
The secession thing. The secession, like your home state being first to secede, and is this comparable to a state wanting to secede from the United States?
I don't know as far as that goes, because one thing that we could say is that there is no Article 50 explicitly in the Constitution. Okay, now people can go on with the 10th Amendment or something like that, but there is no Article 50 per se. Now you could say, well, the 10th Amendment's kind of the Article 50, but the EU does have a formal exit process that is, it's funny because I think it's Abe Lincoln. I don't know if it's spurious or not, but the whole idea that like no government has no governing instrument includes, the means for the destruction of that government, but the European Union does. It's like the European Union explicitly has this Article 50 thing. Now, so I think when it comes down to it, now one point that I think deserves some exploration is when we think about like the inevitability of the Civil War. And it's like, okay, so especially when people just say like, okay, the Civil War was about slavery, period, or whatever. And, it's like when they do that, they typically show like documents from secession conventions and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, yes, this was a huge issue in the, in the 1830s, 1840s, 1850s, big issue surrounding secession. But can you distinguish secession from a war? It's like, does there have to be, was the Civil War inevitable in the United States, and was it the South's fault per se? And, that's where I think that it gets interesting, because it's like when you look at the goals of the Confederacy, that goal was to secede peacefully. Now, of course, that didn't happen, and in most cases that doesn't happen, but I think that when we're looking at a case like this, where you could see the UK get out of the EU, then you could see Scotland get out of the UK. You could see Northern Ireland, unify with Ireland. And you could see all of this done without firing a shot, which kind of brings you to Woodrow Wilson's idea of self-determination of peoples, which, of course, this guy was from the South and, had witnessed the aftermath of the Civil War and, all of that. So I think, because one thing with me, I consider myself somewhat of a light pacifist, at least. I mean, I acknowledge that war is necessary, but I think war can be avoided far more often than we have avoided it through history.
For sure.
And so I think that,
We used to go to war over a pig or a camel.
Yeah, and that's where I think, like, the Civil War, looking at the Civil War and taking kind of a critical approach and, asking, like, was the war a foregone conclusion? Was the war necessary? And that's, Abraham Lincoln in his second inaugural address basically said that, like, God had brought the Civil War on us, that was, like, basically our punishment for slavery, which, when politicians have tried to say similar things, like when that guy in Indiana said that, like, if a woman gets raped and she becomes
pregnant, she can't get pregnant.
Well, that was the guy in Missouri, but the guy in Indiana said, like, well, that's part of God's plan.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, the rape was not part of God's plan. All right, and so
you don't understand free will.
When Abraham Lincoln said that the Civil War was God's judgment on the United States for slavery.
That's a John Brown type comment.
We would not allow a politician today to say something like that, and that's the thing that I think that it deserves at least a bit of pause. Now, I am doing something. I'll go ahead and let y'all know. Anybody that's watching right now, they heard it here first. When I'm done with y'all, I do a video every July 4th. I do some kind of video.
Oh, yeah.
And I recited the Declaration of Independence a year ago. 2 years ago, I talked about, like, life, what is the pursuit of happiness? What was Jefferson talking about? This time, my 4th of July video will be about the original Brexit, and it'll be basically looking at it. And I'm still going into, because I've seen some memes and stuff about it, which I took the liberty of making one myself. Let me share my screen real quick, and I'll put that on there. Let's see. Here we
drum roll here.
Yeah, there we go. Do you see my screen okay?
Oh, yeah.
Yep. So the thing is, I think that there are some things about this, and I'm thinking about framing it in a way that is kind of to our British brethren who might be a little bit discouraged, but to go into things like, hey, you know what? People thought that the people who signed the Declaration of Independence seemed crazy at the time, right?
Right.
Undeniable.
Some of them were.
And people call these Brexiters racist. Well, you know what? People call our founding fathers racist all the time. That happens. It took us a little while to invoke Article 50 as well. It's like we were shooting at each other in April of 1775. And it's not till July of 1776 that we declared our independence. So, our process went a little bit slow. So, and then not everybody was into it. I mean, when it comes down to it, there are different figures, but less than
about a third, wasn't it?
Well, I was reading today about the third myth. Like, there are people, this whole thing we learned in school, like a third here, a third here, and a third here. But you did have, like, from some of the research that I was reading today and some of the numbers, was that you're probably looking at about 20% actively, wanting to stay in the British Empire. Then about 40 to 45% who are actively working for, actively supporting independence. And of course, there are also the fence sitters. Kind of like one of my favorite numbers lately has been on Donald Trump's Muslim ban. 48% of Americans support it. 40% of Americans oppose it.
Jeez.
And then there are 12% of Americans that are like, I don't really have an opinion on that. Like, I mean, which, how do you not have an opinion on that?
I don't watch the Kardashians.
Yeah. I mean, so the thing is that, you did have, I don't think that with the Declaration of Independence, like the majority of the country was not really on board with that. I mean, it was the largest faction. But, there's a comparison there. And, some colonies supported independence less fervently than others. New York could be considered kind of the Scotland of this whole thing. And, independence created, some short-term economic turmoil. And I think that what's important for people to understand is after the war, we basically went right back to being number one trading partners with the British. Like, the British needed our trade, we needed their trade. They wanted to control our trade, but at the end of the day, they needed it. And I think that the British are going to be able to negotiate a good trade deal because they have a trade deficit with the EU. And the EU wants their goods coming in. Now, the EU says right now that, you're not going to be able to stay in the free trade zone unless you allow free movement of peoples. But is that really? I feel like that's a starting point. I feel like if Britain goes to the brink, we've got a game of brinkmanship here. I think that the UK is going to end up getting a good deal because these European heads of state need to be reelected. They need British trade to keep flowing. They don't want to lose their. I mean, politicians want to keep getting reelected, and if their economies suffer, I don't think that they're really. I don't think that these European heads of state want their own governments to fall, to another party because they, held a line on Europe. And so when it comes down to it, I mean, it's like. Eventually, the United States became a world power, was okay, and all that. And maybe this is the beginning of making Britain great again, so to speak. Who knows?
Yeah.
But the thing is that I think that there are a lot of things there that when you look at the American Revolution, that right there at the time, it was a very stupid thing to do, and it seems stupid. Everybody's like, "Oh goodness, what are they doing?" And it ended up being a good thing. So that's where I'm kind of looking at this and trying to draw some comparisons there because, it's like the British are taking a risk. And that's what I think that you've really got fear versus hope. It's like, do you want to stay in this community that offers you some benefits but also controls you in some ways, or do you want to try to try to stake it on your own, like other nations are doing? I mean,
Britain has a fabulously long history of doing that.
Yeah, I mean that's so that's the thing, and I think that Britain is going to be okay. I mean that's really I guess the point that I would make with that is that just like the original Brexiters ended up being okay after a bit of turmoil, I think that the same thing's going to go with Britain.
I looked it up in my book, Tom. 20% were loyalists, 45% supported the revolution, and a third didn't care.
Yeah, I say, hey, buy Robert's book, everybody.
Yes, History Brief, the American Revolution.
Yeah, and that's the thing that we get that but people are like, oh well, it wasn't really a majority of the country because everybody didn't vote, and it's like, look, turnout was 70%, and when does any
that's insanely high.
Now, yeah, and here's the thing: somebody was like, oh, 35% of the country, decided this, and I said, well, you know what? Let's do the math. only about 26% of the United States elected Barack Obama. So, if we're going to say that you need majorities for, and that's something, if you think about it, it's like, wow, it's like the president of the United States is typically elected by only about a quarter of the electorate.
Yeah. I know I mentioned that in the election in 1960, just razor thin, and more people who are eligible to vote didn't vote than voted for Kennedy.
Yeah.
That's scary.
Well, and it's scary to think if everybody did vote. Because think about how many people we don't want voting, and the reason why we have our current system, right?
Oh, yeah.
500 people in Florida get off their butt and go vote for Al Gore. W's never president.
Yeah. What was I going to say about the, man, he said so much there, Tom. A lot of good stuff. What was I?
No, great monologues today.
I think that it is hard to make comparisons. Oh, you talked about conflict, though, with, is there going to be conflict? You mentioned brinkmanship, which I think that's interesting to me in terms of, are you talking more of like economic brinkmanship here?
Well, yeah, it's really like, brinkmanship in terms of, Europe saying right now that we will not, because the British want to be what they want to do is they want to trade freely with Europe, but they want to regulate the people movement. Right. And Europe is saying right now that we're not going to allow you to stay in the free trade zone unless you also accept free movement of peoples. And, there are British, Eurosceptic leaders that are saying no. We can get a better deal. And that's really a lot of the language that Trump has been using. Like, Trump has said, and whether somebody wants to take him at face value or not, but it's just, we're going to Iran and we're sitting down and we're basically like, oh, okay, well, this is the best deal you're going to take. All right. Instead of pushing. And that's the thing. It's like, and that's part of this whole prime minister race right now is a lot of Brexiters, because the front runner right now voted to remain in the EU. And the Brexiters are concerned, like, if we have a prime minister who did not believe that leaving the EU was the best thing, is that prime minister going to be tough as nails and negotiate the best deal possible, or is that person going to just lie down and negotiate a little half-hearted deal?
There's a real possibility they just implement the same stuff that the EU wants to do.
Yeah, and that's
the policy doesn't even change.
That they're not in the EU, but they still have to accept EU immigrants, and that's really what it comes down to. Is are the Brit and I think that's what you've got, because they need each other. 40% of Britain's trade comes from Europe, and Europe has a trade deficit with Britain, and they need the British trade, and so they need each other. And I think that just depending on who's going to the negotiating table, whether on the EU side it could be the EU bureaucrats or the heads of state, and there is some back and forth about that. That who should be negotiating Brexit. Now, if it's the EU bureaucrats, they're going to want to, keep a hard line, but if it's the heads of state who have to get reelected, they're thinking, hey, we want economic relations to be stabilized here so that, so that we keep our jobs. And
how awkward of a conversation is that between whoever and Angela Merkel? Because she's like the face of Europe, and she obviously doesn't want Britain leaving. But what you just said, they have to come up with some kind of a deal. It's Germany and Britain, right? The two big economies in Europe.
Yeah, they need each other. All these countries.
She can't punish them. But how does it make her look if she doesn't? If France looks around and goes, wow, Britain just got that deal, and they don't have to be in the EU?
So that's why you're saying all the dominoes are going to be falling.
Yeah, if Britain gets a good deal out of it, why wouldn't they? Just.
Yeah, the countries to stand to lose the most are the countries like Lithuania, that are so dependent on all these. That's really what it is, and that kind of shows you Europe is not as
Yeah.
cohesive.
It's not as unified as you would think.
Yeah, there's really just four or five dogs that kind of run everything, and everyone else is like kind of like on leashes, like, oh, come on.
Well, and I think Western Europe has made a mistake, has made a tactical error in not only with the EU but with NATO. I think that these incursions into the traditional Russian sphere of influence, if you would have if you would have never let Poland and Lithuania and these other countries into the EU, then you wouldn't have these issues. I mean, a lot of this stuff in Britain has been resentment about, immigrants from Eastern Europe.
And
Yeah,
Hungary.
So that's the thing when it comes down to it. I think that, that the West, they saw a weakness there in Russia. And they thought, okay, we're going to run in there and we're going to grab this stuff while it's there. And of course, now with the rise of Putin, you see that Russia's starting to, to reassert itself. And that's the thing that I think that, it's just they thought sometimes it's like that apple's there ready to be picked, and maybe I shouldn't have picked it. It's like you could ask, Adam and Eve about that. So that's the thing, that not everything that is ripe for the picking necessarily needs to be picked. And I think that if the EU would have stayed primarily a Western European project,
the Freedom Club, those countries of Western Europe.
Yeah, I think that they expanded too quickly and tried to integrate those countries into the European community too quickly.
Yeah, because I mean, like, where's Poland's economy compared to Britain's? So you tell all the people in Poland, hey, you can go to Britain, they can't stop you, and you can get on their social welfare benefits and get housing and health care, and they're like, okay. I mean, who wouldn't do that?
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you said, Tom, that I think it's going to be unstable probably for a little bit, but in the end, I think it's going to be okay. Everything's going to end up.
Yeah, now.
But then at the same time, we're probably looking at a recession here in the near future. And
we're due for one. We hadn't fixed.
That was going to happen anyway.
We never fixed the last one.
Well, they're going to blame Brexit.
Would Brexit be blamed for that? And when, of course,
it will.
The real blame of that should be the fact that, all the countries of the world are just printing whatever they want.
Central bank manipulation, fiat currency.
Yeah.
Now, Matt, I've got a little graphic here to put up.
Yeah.
That you can see some things here as far as the EU and, in Europe, the GDP per capita, where in Luxembourg, you've got 6 figures. And then Norway, very wealthy country, Switzerland, and these are some non-EU countries as well. It looks like this.
Norway,
but the thing is already 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. About 7 countries in. That's already cut in half from some of these more prosperous ones at the top. And then you're really getting into these countries that have. Comparable to the United States. Now, the United Kingdom, you see where I think if you would have taken this like 20 years ago, the United Kingdom would have been farther up there.
Oh, yeah.
But, the thing is, I think that their per cap, it's just they really, and that's what the media doesn't want to report, that they've paid a pretty high price for all of the immigration that's come in there. And they know it.
Enormous.
And so the thing is, though, when you go into some of these countries like Portugal, and Greece, where the per capita GDP is not even $25,000, and you go to Poland, the GDP is 15,000. Well, the UK, it's 3 times that. Well, go over there and get the benefits. But now we're kind of getting into like non-EU countries over there, but it's a very, very diverse continent with some very poor countries. In there, and some of those countries part of the EU. When you look at some of these, some of these countries here, where it's like, wow, these are some very poor countries that have like freedom of exchange of goods. Now, another thing is when you look at trade, I think there was one of the controversies was about like steel coming in from Poland. You know, that's something that they voted on, I think, in the Netherlands recently, that a lot of these, you know, when you've got a free trade zone, and you can send your manufacturing jobs, you can either put them here or you can put them here in Poland, you know, versus the UK, you're going to put those jobs in Poland. And so that's what, you know, which you're looking at a similar deal as like, you know, NAFTA and what that's done to our, you know, manufacturing class, which, you know.
That's what I keep thinking is what the heck are all these people going to do? I mean,
yeah, and that's the thing.
Are they going to have there? They're low skilled or untrained.
Yeah, we expand, but we don't have any mechanism to reintegrate these people who are losing their jobs except to put them on welfare. And, you know, people want something better than that. And that's really what it comes down to, I think, is that you've got, you know, and that's the thing, that in the long run, all of this works great, you know. I mean, economic liberalism, I think, is a great recipe for the long run, and I believe in it. But, you know, it's like Keynes said, in the long run, we're all dead, you know. So you've got this situation here where these expansions are moving so fast, and a lot of people are being left behind.
Yeah, and so much of it is fueled off of, you know, trying to stimulate the economy. Government's trying to stimulate the economy by supplying it with lots of cash. Or really, it's not literally cash; it's just money electronically, and
figurative.
And trying to, you know, stimulate growth in the economy. And it is. I mean, I think that's part of the problem. Another part of the problem, like we said earlier, is automation. And I think so much of the future is really about not immigrants taking all the jobs from the middle class in certain countries, but robots. And that will be a new challenge we'll be talking about sooner than later here.
Let's just go up there and hit. I want fries with that.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is just a lot of what politicians do is they talk about how can we put a Band-Aid on this issue, you know, like how can we
how far can we kick this can down the road?
Yeah, I mean that's what we've been seeing for several decades now. And
20 trillion, that's nothing. Let's go 30.
We're probably due for a major economic catastrophe, probably greater than the Great Recession, and it's going to be worldwide. And of course, I don't know when, but surely it will happen in the near future, within a couple of years. And like you guys said, it's just a natural cycle that it can't keep going like it's going anyway. As long as all these countries are just manipulating their currency so much. And
yeah, I mean, that's the only countries in the EU can't do that. The ones that don't have their own, like Greece, I mean, that's what's killed them.
Well, UK never had the euro, though, right?
So, well, that's what I'm saying, is Greece cannot. And how do they, you know, that's a huge barrier to them leaving if they don't still have their own money. Like Denmark could do it. Britain, you know, just did it. The countries that don't, you know, if you got rid of the franc,
yeah,
what do?
Well, everyone's just going to have Bitcoin. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah,
China's buying up all the Bitcoin. They're all about the cryptocurrency in China. I don't know.
Crazy.
If you look at what the Chinese are doing, a lot of it is kind of forward thinking, and you're just like, well, wait a second, why aren't we doing that in, you know, Europe or Japan or here?
We'll argue over who's on our 20 before we'll.
Yes, Harriet Tubman. I'm still really excited about that.
Oh, what? We need Tom's opinion on Andrew Jackson or Harriet Tubman. Go.
Oh gosh, that's like I'm not even gonna. I mean, I don't really. You know, I think I'm one of those people without an opinion, possibly. I mean, I don't know. It's just I think
30%.
It's kind of like Matt was saying, as far as, you know, just we'll argue about our currency more than, you know, it's like we've got government officials rebranding our currency rather than getting stuff done. It's like they're getting paid to do this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I certainly don't have a problem with Harriet Tubman on the currency, but it is one thing that just kind of gets me a little bit, is just the sudden rebrand. What looks like is that we've got several pieces of currency that are going to look different in the next 5 years. And it's just I think that to some extent that kind of stuff needs to happen. I'd kind of like to see us go like the British do, that nobody stays on the currency forever. It's like people rotate off of their currency every so often. So I think in the United States we have a pretty long, tradition, of the currency. I'd just maybe like to see it, changed a little more slowly. I mean, I do think that, there is some of that. I mentioned that, the Brexiters, people call them racist, and people also call our founding fathers racist. That there is this sort of thing that, 5 years from now, when my daughter's in middle school, the founding fathers are not going to have nearly as dominant of a place on our currency as they did when we were growing up. And it's like this, there seems to be a subtext there that our founding fathers are not heroes. I mean, those should not be our national heroes. Here are your national heroes according to the Obama administration. And so I think that, really we should have more of a rotating basis and not have one administration whose officials are making sweeping changes to the currency. I mean, that's my view. It's not so much just a Harriet Tubman, Andrew Jackson thing, as much as, we've got a lot of inertia in our currency, and, we shouldn't change stuff too quickly just for the sake of doing it.
To make a political statement.
Yeah, it's the politicization of our currency, which I'm not a real, big fan of. But I think when I went to Britain and realized, they rotate people. Churchill's about to make an appearance on their,
Wow. He got kicked out of the White House.
Yeah. And the thing is, he won't be there forever. That's part of, I think, what may be a bit of a problem. Now, for me, what I'd want to do is go back to have like the Mercury dimes. I tell my students, like, look, before World War II, like our currency had like Roman gods on it and stuff. Like
that'd be awesome.
That's the kind of stuff that I can get into. So I'd like to see more of that if we're going to go in a direction with our currency. Let's bring the Mercury dimes back.
Yeah, it's always been politicized. Anytime.
But of course, FDR is revered by this administration. So it's all about politics and all of that kind of stuff. And Hamilton.
Yeah, everything with Obama's political, everything.
Well, and even history itself, like Cypher has a good video. I don't know if Tom, you ever see Cypher's channel, The Cynical Historian?
Yeah, I think I've seen a little bit. He's been on some of your stuff before.
Yeah, he has, and he has a great video about really does a good job succinctly explaining three major school of thought in terms of history over the past, I don't know, a couple hundred years. And you got your Orthodox, and then that dominated throughout most of American history, and the historians that valued, exceptionalism and progress and the positives about history, which I think you guys are kind of leaning more towards that. And then the new left movement that started with the counterculture of the 1960s, and how they focused on the mistakes of the past and what we need to learn from these mistakes. And then kind of the third movement has been kind of neither, where you're just looking at the evidence and not determining conclusions. And I think that's the direction that we all kind of should try to go. And politicizing history is always a dangerous thing, because you said people thinking the founding fathers are racist. Well, shoot, I mean, most presidents were racist.
They were, yeah.
I mean, look at some of the stuff that even Franklin Roosevelt said. I mean, goodness, Harry Truman even. And so I think whenever people talk about history, forgetting that, oh yeah, people were completely different, even physically. They didn't even grow as tall as we did 50 years ago. How do you expect them to even have the same? You can't even compare. It's apples and oranges. I mean, so you've always got to remember to separate. Like today's reality from that. But we've got about
Yeah,
7 minutes, guys. Is there anything else you wanted to squeeze in here before we go? I mean, not literally squeeze. I mean,
in a very figurative sense.
Figurative.
Friendly game.
Let's promote. Let's promote our stuff. Go ahead. You want to say something, Robert?
Oh, it's just one thing that popped in my head. It was earlier in the conversation when we were talking about, Britain being economically independent. Now they just follow Switzerland. That's really all they have to do. The blueprints there.
Is that easy?
Yeah, Switzerland does it.
Yeah, everybody wants to be Switzerland. I wish I could pay ridiculously high prices for everything and live in Switzerland.
Yeah.
No, yeah, that I really do. I think we all agree. There's going to be major changes happening in the world, and a lot of it can be traced back to what happened last Thursday, June 25th.
That's who they're going to blame everything bad on. It's Brexit.
Or
it's your fault.
People who,
or Trump.
Things go right and everything. Look. But yeah, let's before I sign off here, I want to direct everybody to where you can find the podcast on iTunes, and I want to bring up the fact that we have been doing this show for almost exactly 1 year. Did you know that?
Hey, our Independence Day, our birthday.
Yes, are you guys seen that? Okay, good. Yeah, so our first episode was July 8th of last year, so we've almost reached our 1 year anniversary, and it's been fun. Robert, I think Tom has been with us. I think he joined us last year sometime as well, but yeah.
I tend to say this is my third time on here. I know at least twice.
Yeah.
I believe it is.
You can review us on there. It's you can still download all the episodes. And again, you want to contact us? It's contextpodcast@gmail.com. And how about we all promote what we got going on here? Tom, what do you want to promote? You want to just whatever.
Oh, okay. Yeah, just my YouTube channel. I think you can find it linked with on Mr. Beat's channel, Tom Richey. Then again, TomRichey.net. If you go to YouTube, just put in Tom R. You should be able to find me. So.
Oh, you're to that point. It fills in.
Yeah, it was a big deal for me when I finally passed up Tom Riddle, who is not real. He was not even a real person. So I thought, I've gotten ahead of this guy.
You made it.
Exist outside of books, so that's a pretty good place to be, I guess. But history videos, that sort of thing. So that's basically what I do, and it's good to be here with these people. I mean, I remember when I was it was even before I started YouTubing. I found one of Matt's videos. I still show it every year, the inventions of the Industrial Revolution. It's a great video.
Wow.
And it's hey, now I'm just podcasting, shooting the breeze, live, whatever. So, it's great to be here with y'all.
That video I made, it's one of the worst videos I ever made production-wise. I still show it too.
It got the point across, though, man. I mean, it really does get the point across.
It's about the script, about the language you use, and
yeah, the script was great. It's just he just uses all this very deadpan humor, throughout the whole thing. And I mean, I really like it. I mean, I must have just got. I mean, it's about a 6 or 7. I mean, it's an old video, maybe 6, 7 years old.
Yeah,
it's a great thing about history. It doesn't really change. So.
Yeah, especially not spinning jennies and water frames and all that.
I still have some in my basement. Yeah. All right.
You have a spinning Jenny in your basement?
Well, how do you think I made this shirt?
Yeah.
Now, Robert, you want to go ahead and promote what you're working on?
Our newest Kindle book out there is Andrew Jackson.
Yeah.
So check out Andrew Jackson History Brief, and of course the book will be out as soon as I can get Jake to make it. Gotta hold his feet over the fire.
Jake better be watching right now.
Now,
Jake is in Montana on vacation.
Now, Robert, is it going to sell for $20?
It's actually, if you get there right now, it's 99 cents on the
You don't even need
Kindle.
more of a Washington than a Jackson, that kind of thing.
Yeah, there's pictures. I got pictures in that Kindle. I finally figured that out. So that's cool.
And you're reading through history on YouTube. You can find that.
Yeah.
If you search "reading through history" on Amazon, you don't show up right away. So you
Yeah. You have to type in the name of the Andrew Jackson history brief, and then it will show up.
Trying to do that now for everybody, and it wasn't working out very well. Yeah, it's still not. Oh well. We'll put the link in the show notes. How about that? But yeah, you can find my YouTube channel at just type in Mr. Beat Social Studies or Mr. Beat History. It pops up. And I'm currently getting ready to make my election of 1916 video. That's up next. It's going to be hard to top 1912, though. 1912 is such a good an election to look at. But yeah, until next time, thanks for listening, and most importantly, happy 4th of July.
Happy Independence Day.
Yeah.
Happy birthday, America.
America.
America.